Hello, and welcome to the second workshop presented by the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub at the University of Minnesota, titled Inclusive Engagement, Partnering with the Disability Community. In this workshop, we will focus on building an action plan. We've designed these workshops to be asynchronous, which means that it is self-guided and you can proceed at your own pace. You can also use these videos and resources for individual learning. Use them with your staff or in a classroom with your students. We have a suggested agenda and pacing that you can follow if that's helpful, but please adjust to suit your needs. Shun and I introduced ourselves in the introductory video, which we recommend watching, but just quickly, and to also model some of the access practices that we hope you'll begin to implement, we're going to introduce ourselves with short visual descriptions. So my name is Jessica Cooley. I use she, her pronouns. I am a proudly fat, lushly enfleshed white woman with brown hair, and I'm wearing a dark blue shirt today. And I'm currently the guest curator at the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub.
Hello, everyone. My name is Xun, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Chinese woman with black hair wearing a light green hoodie. And I'm currently the graduate research assistant in the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub.
Yay. Another access practice that we advocate for is to visually describe whatever images and text are presented on the screen. And so on this opening slide, there is an image of multicolored sticky notes from the community art project that was created during the opening night celebration for the community curated exhibition called The Art of Disability Justice Now. In response to the question, what does disability justice mean to you? Community members' responses included equity for all, collective care, and ask, don't assume. The text reads inclusive engagement, partnering with the disability community, part 2, building an action plan. And there is a text box with an arrow pointing to images of the sticky notes that reads, community responses to the question, what does disability justice mean to you? And we want to begin this workshop like we'd begin any meeting or class session or event with one of the most important access practices we hope you'll use, which is to do an access check. And an access check is a proactive practice used to identify and address barriers to participation. It ensures that spaces, events, or communications are accessible and inclusive for all individuals, but particularly for disabled folks. So we covered access checks in a little more detail in the first workshop. So please review that for more details. But access checks really just generally depend on what kind of meeting you're running. And we hope that in whatever way you are engaging with this recorded workshop, that you attend to your whole self. And we invite you to engage with this video in whatever way brings you comfort and creates the most access for you. On this slide, you'll also find a QR code, which will take you to the slide deck for this workshop, which also has our full script in the notes section in case that's a more accessible way for you to engage. So I moved on to the third slide, and here we have the suggested agenda for this workshop. It's designed to be approximately 120 minutes, and there are multiple points in the workshop where we will ask you to break off into small groups or to do individual reflections. At these points, we will ask you to simply pause the video and then come back when you are ready. We are including this agenda slide because it also models another form of access that you might want to implement in your own work, which is to give people a sense of what to expect and also to know that there will be breaks. And we recommend breaks every 45 minutes. However, best practice is to listen to your participants. And if they need more breaks or longer breaks, please implement their request. So a brief overview of what we'll do today. Shun will briefly summarize what we covered in the first workshop. And then we will build on that workshop to focus on developing a concrete action plan for how you can engage with the disability community. We will discuss how to identify key partners, how to assess your available resources, and then outline a strategy that includes project goals, accessibility planning, and timelines. And Shun will lead us in some guided exercises as we hope you will leave with a clear, actionable framework for fostering meaningful collaborations with disability communities. And so I will move on to the next slide for Shun.
Thank you, Jessica. To kick us off, let's spend the next 5 minutes revisiting the core lessons from the workshop 1 so we can build directly on that foundation. In workshop 1, we modeled an access check right at the start, as Jessica did earlier in this workshop as well. We invite folks to flag audio or caption issues, also when they need a break, and described with every image out loud. Next, we covered 4 pillars for ethic outreach. First one, consultation. Ask and continuously re-ask collaborators what they need. Second one, flexibility. Be ready to pivot as needs evolve. Third one, multimodal communication. Offer emails, phone, videos, or in-person ways of communication. 4, co-design. This means live with the mantra, nothing about us without us, by involving disability communities at every steps. These steps ensure that we are not guessing needs, but co-creating accessible experiences. We then go into compensation. Disability communities deserve fair pay for every role, either it's consultations, workshops, or participant presentations, beyond just deliverables. Be transparent about payment timelines, especially in large institutions like the U, and watch for benefit cliff issues. At the U, payment under $600 bypass extra reporting, but over that threshold may impact someone's benefit. When in doubt, co-consult with the individual and your financial manager to find creative and non-harmful solutions. The next one is building trust time. In this section, Jessica introduced Crib Time, which talks about the need for schedule flexibility, and then Spoon Theory, which focuses on how daily energy is finite and must be managed. Then about planning meetings, deadlines, and workload with those models in mind leads to sustainable collaborations and prevents burnout. Then we talked about supportive engagement that rests on 4 commitments. First, listen and learn. Second, empower, use non-hierarchical decision-making, such as 0 to 5 voting. Third, collaborate. And the last one, accountability. These principles foster environment where everyone can truly feel belong. Finally, we practiced analyzing and critiquing a sample outreach email. We spotting language that feel inaccessible and rewrote it to center mutual respect. We wrapped up workshop 1 by sharing 2 ready-to-use email templates, one for in-person event and one for online gathering that embed plain language details, proactive access information, and easy low-pressure accommodation request. And that completes our recap of workshop 1. In the rest of today's session, we will apply these lessons to an action plan, and I will hand over back to Jessica.
Thanks, Shun. All right, so we're moving on to the first large part of this workshop, and it's arguably the most important part of this series, which is to ask yourself why you want to engage the disability community. Understanding your why will act as its own guide for how you shape who you engage, how you engage, and will ultimately shape what your project is and how you will measure success. And before diving into this part of the workshop, we want to pause and offer you a meditation on the kind of disability engagement that we do and advocate for, which ultimately shapes our why for doing this work. From the introductory video for the series, you will have heard Shun and I discussing the disability justice movement. For us, the principles of disability justice deeply inform our approach and our why. I am a person who identifies with disability, including neurodiversity, a traumatic brain injury, and chronic illness. It is also important for me to recognize that as a white, non-immigrant, cisgendered woman, I have been afforded access to educational, social, and professional pathways that have long been denied to many trans, immigrant, and BIPOC individuals. It's important for me to understand that white supremacy continues to shape systems of power and access, including within universities, and that I have been and will continue to be committed to actively working against it. In our approach to disability justice and community engagement, we believe it's essential to center those who experience multiple forms of marginalization. It may be helpful, especially as individuals connected to institutions like the university, to understand our role not necessarily as the leader or the decider or the expert, but instead as a collaborator and perhaps more importantly, as a support system where we can harness institutional resources to build and fund platforms that uplift the voices, visions, and artistic expressions of disabled community members. In practice, this has meant initiating projects in ways that intentionally leave space for others to shape them. For example, in my work, curating an exhibition about disability art, rather than taking on the role of lead curator and decider, I chose to share my platform out with the local group Amplify Minnesota, a disability justice collective. I worked closely with Amplify Minnesota and the students in my class to create an exhibition and programming that served the local disability community. With the support of the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub, additional grants, partnerships with other units on campus, and an outside partnership with the Minnesota Historical Society, we were able to financially support this collaborative work that centered the expertise of the local disability community to upend traditional hierarchical structures of power and instead aim for horizontal, shared decision-making practices. We think of this kind of collaborative work as a form of care, a model where our institutional and personal platforms are shared so that others can amplify the work and wisdom of their communities. Ultimately, our goal is not to create programming and engagement that is about others, but to co-create spaces with them, where their experiences, knowledge, and leadership are foregrounded. In this way, the university can act as an infrastructure of support for the dreams and demands of the local disability community, and not as a gatekeeper. We can act as an ally and an amplifier. So as you move through the why of your engagement, you may want to pause for an extended moment and review some resources that we've shared with you, including the PDF titled Disability Justice, an Audit Tool, as well as the PDF titled Skin, Tooth, and Bone, a Disability Justice Primer, by the disability justice group Sins Invalid. And so now Shun is going to lead us in an exercise to help you think deeply about your why.
Thank you, Jessica. Now we are going to use a simple but powerful technique called the 5 whys to deepen our understanding of why engaging with the disability community matters. You will see how asking why 5 times in a row can take us to the heart of our motivations and purpose. First, we start by writing down your immediate answer to why do we want to engage with the disability community. To answer this, you might want to consider why this is important for your organization or affiliation and why this is important to you personally. You might consider if there are principles from the 10 principles of disability justice from the resource Jessica just mentioned that are important to you or would like to implement. Or ask yourself, what do you hope to achieve through this engagement? Next, ask why that's important and write your response beneath. Continue asking why is that important until you have 5 asked times total. As you dig deeper, notice when your values emerge. This deeper insight will guide more authentic and lasting engagement. You can do this activity individually or in a small group. If you are in a small group, read one another person's chain of 5 whys and note which level felt most surprising or powerful for you. If you are doing this alone, in the next slide, we will share an example and you can think about some question. Now feel free to pause the video and work on your 5 whys. Welcome back. I have moved on to the slide about an example of how 5 whys unfold. The text reads, first, why do we want to engage with disability community? The answer is because we believe in being inclusive. Why is inclusive important to us? Because everyone deserves equal access and opportunity. The third question is, why do we believe access and opportunity matter? Because systematic barriers has historically excluded disabled people. Then we move to fourth question. Why do we feel responsible for addressing that exclusion? The answer is because we have power and we have a platform. We can do something about it. Why is using our platform for justice important to us? Because equity and accountability are core to who we are as an organization. Here, the first answer that we want to be inclusive is valid, but is the first surface level. By the 5th why, we arrived at equity and accountability, which are the deepest drivers of our work. When we plan events, design programs, or set policy, these core values become our true note. They helped us stay focused on shifting power, not just checking a box. When we center these core motivations and values in our work, our engagement with disability community becomes more genuine and transformative.
We welcome you now to take a break, and please come back and join us when you are ready. In this section, we're going to identify community partners that you might want to work with And your responses to the why exercise is going to help guide your decision-making process. We've put together a sample list of local Twin Cities disability organizations for your review that are in the resources folder. This list is not exhaustive, and we've made this document editable so that you and others can continue to add more organizations to this list. Or you may want to work with a group of disabled people or a disabled individual that's not officially associated with an organization. And that's great too. You can certainly still use our suggestions for best practices when you are reaching out to those individuals. You may, in fact, already know who you want to partner with. And so for this part of the workshop, you could spend time brainstorming how they fit into your why. Consider where your values align and what your shared goals are. When thinking about what organizations or individuals to partner with, we also want to recommend keeping in mind the following. So is this organization informed by a disability politics that centers disabled people in terms of the social and cultural model? That is, does the organization seek to empower disabled people, or is it reinscribing a medical model? Relatedly, does this organization echo the mantra, nothing about us without us? Is this organization run by disabled people? Do they have disabled people on their board? Or do they have ways of ensuring disabled people have decision-making power? You will also want to spend time considering how you can reciprocally work together. In other words, how do you intend to build with this group, as opposed to reinscribing a kind of charity model of doing for? So after you brainstorm for about 10 minutes, we invite you to take 5 or 10 minutes to share your ideas with your team or classmates and ask them for feedback or answer any questions. So please pause the video here and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. All right, welcome back. In this next section, we're going to talk about accessing the right resources to make this partnership a success. First, don't worry if you don't already have all the resources. We'll help you identify what you need. This part of the workshop is broken into 4 sections where we will cover financial resources, access and accommodations. Shun will lead us in an exercise for asking about access. And the last part will be time for you to draft out what you think you need. So in the previous workshop, we talked about financial compensation, but we want to reiterate a few of those points here. In order to create reciprocal and ethical engagement with the disability community, you have to prioritize compensating folks for their time and expertise in a way that recognizes the value of the lived experience of disabled people. Best practices say that we not just compensate people for their product or deliverable, but that they are compensated for all aspects of their collaboration, including consultations, advisory roles, workshops, presentations, or any form of engagement where the university is asking the disability community for its time and expertise. Please be transparent about compensation structures and payment processes by clearly communicating expectations and timelines for payment. You will also want to keep in mind disability benefit limits. Therefore, it's important to consult with the individuals and organization you are partnering with to understand their benefits and what is and is not allowable. And it is important to then also consult with your financial manager to make sure you are complying with the regulations of your particular department or unit on campus. In terms of locating money to pay your partners, you may want to pull from your general budget, or you may want to look into applying for internal or external grants. If you are a student, ask your teacher or department if they have funds to support community-engaged projects. If you are a staff or faculty member, you may want to consider applying for a residency with the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub, or looking for internal grants like the Imagine Fund grant. And we'll have a list of possible internal grants for you to consider applying to in our resource folder. So in the previous workshop, we also talked about access and accommodation, but we want to reiterate, again, a few important points. We recommend beginning this process by asking if you and your team are prepared to offer the needed accommodations and access for your community partners. We recommend in your very first communication to ask your potential community partners what you can do to create access for them. You will want to anticipate some of these needs based on who they are. For example, if you're working with a group that centers people who are deaf or hard of hearing, know that you should be prepared to offer ASL, closed captions with CART services, and to use microphones. Or if you are reaching out to communities that serve people with cognitive disabilities, from the start, you want to create communications that are in what's called plain language. And plain language is clear, straightforward communication that uses simple words and structure, so the intended audience can easily understand and use the information. And we have more information in the resources folder about what plain language is and how you can assess your own writing. The U offers some services through their Disability Resources Center that are available for free under certain conditions, but you may need to be prepared to hire independent ASL interpreters and CART captioners. In the resource folder, we have a document that outlines available accommodation services that the U provides. And so now I'm going to turn things over to Shun to talk in more detail about one way we can ensure access.
Thank you, Jessica. In the next section, we will go through an activity on creating access statements. First, we distinguish two types of statements. The first type, an organization's access statement, lives alongside its mission statement and describes the organization's outreaching commitments to accessibility. For example, in the Hub's accessibility resource tools, we made it front and clear that we are working to incorporate principles of disability justice into the physical accessibility of our space and events, as well as our leadership structure and content creation. Feel free to follow that link into this resource folder. And can we come back to the slide, Jessica? Thank you. Then an event access statement is more focused. It welcomes participants, lists typical accommodations such as captions or technologies, and explains how and when to request them. The example here is a screenshot from the Hub's event RSVP form. You can see that we list our accessibility standards and the resources available. We also invite participants to share any information regarding accommodations or other needs, whether it's in person or online. That would be helpful for us to plan for more accessible events. I will move on to the next slide to talk about the key elements of an event access statement for you to consider when drafting one. First, it begins with a friendly invitation that emphasizes inclusion rather than simply meeting regulations. Second, you can consider to have a reasonable request timeline, and that timeline is flexible on late request. Third, it could provide concrete examples of accommodations like sign language interpretation, real-time captioning, or other materials. Fourth, it speaks in plain language that Jessica explained earlier and use respectful terms. Finally, it reassures readers that their needs are valued and that the organization will do their best to fulfill them. In the next slide, we prepared two samples of event accessibility statement. The first one, I will read the first one. If you think you might need special assistance, fill out Form ADA 12 at least a week before the event. Late requests may not be honored. And I will read the second one now. We are committed to creating an inclusive and accessible event. Let us know any accommodation you need, such as sign language interpretation, large font, print, screen reduced, since reduced spaces, etc. by email XXX. Early notice helps us prepare, but reach out anytime. In a small group or by yourself, think about which statement would you rather say and why, and please write down your thoughts or discuss with your group. Please feel free to pause here to take the time you need to finish this thinking process. Welcome back. Now, let's compare these two statements. The statement one asks people to submit a form, ADA 12, that I don't know of before this workshop, at least 1 week before the event, and warns that late requests may not be honored. That phrasing is bureaucratic and exclusive, places the burden on participants, and may discourage people from asking. Statement 2, by contract, begins with we committed to create an inclusive and accessible event, which centers organizations' responsibility. It lists sample accommodations and gives a clear contact method. And it also explains earlier notice is helpful. We'll still welcoming requests at any time. When you're drafting your own event access statement, aim for that same tone of genuine welcome and support. I will hand over back to Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you, Shun. And so now we would kind of want to pull everything together from this section and want to invite you to take some time to assess what resources you anticipate needing and to make a plan for how you will access them. Then if you're working in groups, we invite you to share those plans and ask each other questions or offer each other feedback. So pause here and come back when you're ready. Thanks. Welcome back. Based on your responses from today, we want to invite you to take time to outline an action plan. We want you to outline an action plan that's going to be the most helpful for you at the stage in your process. So it can take multiple forms. You might want to draft a project statement or summary that you will share with your community partner that outlines your why, or why you want to work with a specific partner, what you can offer them, what you hope to gain, and an outline of the project itself. Or you may want to spend this time building a map that identifies the key players and contacts, that drafts a timeline, or also outlines a budget. Or you may want to make a plan for access and or how you will center principles of disability justice by reviewing the 10 principles of disability justice, identifying one or two of them, excuse me, and then making a plan for how you will incorporate those principles into your work. So we invite you to pause the video here and come back in about 15 minutes. Welcome back. We have reached the end of our time together, and we are so grateful for your participation. We want to recognize that this is just an introduction. It is not comprehensive, but it's an important start to doing this work. We hope you leave this workshop with a deeper understanding of all of our mutual responsibilities to create access and inclusion. And we hope that you will continue your work to help reimagine more sustainable, equitable, and joyful ways to live and work together. If you follow the QR code here, you can offer us some feedback about this workshop. And we are so grateful for you being here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.